Disease, destitution, and death were ever present in the Victorian era, and the impact of all weighed most heavily on the poor, working classes, especially children. Life was hard enough when an adult lost a job or their health, and a child was likely to go without adequate food and clothing. But in a world of short, brutal lives, it wasn't uncommon for a boy or girl to be left without any parent at all. And what then? Orphans were forced into the workhouse or onto the streets, as were runaways from broken homes or abusive parents. The streets were seen as preferable to the workhouse, for it offered freedom and companionship, despite its dangers. However they found their way onto the streets, they had to work, beg or steal, and learn to survive in a mean and dangerous world. Today, you will hear a contemporary account of orphans and runaways by Henry Mayhew, a Victorian journalist who concerned himself with the lives of London's poor. You will learn, in much detail, about the hard lives of some of the children he met and interviewed in the 1840s, and discover how they struggled to find work, to feed themselves, and stay out of the hands of criminals and a life of crime. Before we move on, please consider clicking the subscribe button for more content like this. If you find this video interesting, I would really appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up and share it widely with friends and family. Please check out the description to see how you can support the channel and the content we make. From one of the class of orphans I had the following account. It may be observed that the lad's statement contains little of incident or of novelty, but this is characteristic of many of his class. With many of them, it may indeed be said, one day certifieth another. It is often the same tale of labour and of poverty, day after day, so that the mere uniformity makes a youth half oblivious of the past, the months, or perhaps years, seem all alike. This boy seemed healthy, wore his suit of corduroy, evidently not made for him, and but little patched. Although old, he was in good spirits. "I don't know, I believe I'm between 15 and 16, he said. "And mother died more than 2 years ago, nearer 3 perhaps. Father had gone dead a long time afore. I don't remember him." I'm inclined to think that this story of the death of the father is often told by the mother of an illegitimate child to her offspring, through a natural repugnance to reveal her shame to her child. I do not know, however, that it was the case in this instance. "I don't remember about mother's funeral, for I was ill myself at the time. She worked with her needle, sometimes for a dressmaker, on skirts, and sometimes for a tailor, on flannels. She sometimes worked all night, but we was very badly off. We was so. She had only me. When mother died, there was nothing left for me, but there was a good woman. She was a laundress and kept a mangle, and she said, 'Well, here's an old basket and a few odd things. Give the kid the basket and turn the bits of old traps into money, and let him start on muffins, and then he must shift for hisself.' So she took me to a shop, and I was started in the muffin line. I didn't do so bad, but it's only a winter trade, isn't muffins. I sold creases next. No, not creases. Cherries, yes. It was creases, and then cherries, for I remembers as how Hungerford was the first market I ever was at. It was so. Since then I've sold apples and oranges and nuts and chestnuts, but they was dear the last time as I had 'em, and spring garters, a penny a pair, and glass pens, yes, and other things. I goes to market, mostly to Common Garden, and there's a man goes there what buys bushels and bushels, and he'll let me have any little lot reasonable, he will. So there's another will, but he ain't so good to a poor kid. Well, I doesn't know as how one's trade better nor another. I think I've done as much in one as in another, but I've done better lately. I've sold more oranges and had a few sticks of rhubarb. I think times is mending, but others say that's only me luck. I sleeps with a boy as is younger nor am I, and pays 9p a week. Tom's father and mother. He's a coal heaver, but he's sometimes out of work. Sleeps in the same room, but we has a good bed to ourselves. Tom's father knew my mother. There's only 4 of us. Tom's father said sometimes if his rheumatics continues, he and all of 'em must go into the house. Most likely I should then go to a lodging house. I don't know that some of 'em's bad places. I've heard they was jolly. I has no amusements. Last year I helped a man one day, and he did so well on fruit, for he got such an early start, and so cheap, that he gave me 3p extra to go to the play with.
I didn't go. I'd rather go to bed at 7 every night than anywhere else. I'm fond of sleep. I never wakes at night. I dreams now and then, but I never remembers a dream. I can't read or write. I wish I could, if it would help me on. But I'm making 3 shillings 6pence a week now, I think. Some weeks in winter, I didn't make 2 shillings.
This boy, although an orphan at a tender age, was yet assisted to the commencement of a business by a friend. I met with another lad who was left under somewhat similar circumstances. The persons in the house where his mother had died were about to take him to the parish officers, and there seemed to be no other course to be pursued to save their child, then nearly 12, from starvation. The lad knew this and ran away. It was summer-time, about 3 years ago, and the little runaway slept in the open air whenever he could find a quiet place. Want drove him to beg, and several days he subsisted on 1 penny which he begged. One day he did not find anyone to give him even half a penny, and towards the evening of the second he became bold, or even desperate, from hunger. As if by a sudden impulse, he went up to an old gentleman, walking round in Hyde Park, and said to him,
"Sir, I've lived 3 weeks by begging, and I'm hungering now. Give me 6pence or I'll go and steal."
The gentleman stopped and looked at the boy, in whose tones there must have been truthfulness, and in whose face was no doubt starvation, for without uttering a word, he gave the young applicant a shilling. The boy began a street seller's life on lucifer matches. I had to see him for another purpose a little while ago, and in the course of some conversation he told me of his start in the streets. I have no doubt he told the truth, and I should have given a more detailed account of him, but when I inquired for him, I found he had gone to Epsom races to sell cards, and had not returned, having probably left London on a country tour. But for the old gentleman's bounty he would have stolen something, he declared, had it been only for the shelter of a prison. Of an orphan girl, I heard the following account.
"Father was a whitesmith,
a metal worker," she said,
and mother used to go out washing and cleaning, and me and my sister. But she is dead now. Did nothing. We was sent to a day school, both of us. We lived very comfortable. We had 2 rooms and our own furniture. We didn't want for nothing when father was alive. He was very fond on us both, and was a kind man to everybody. He was took bad first when I was very young. It was consumption he had, and he was ill many years, about 5 years, I think it was, before he died. When he was gone, mother kept us both. She had plenty of work. She couldn't bear the thought of our going into the streets for a living, and we was both too young to get a place anywhere. So we stayed at home and went to school just as when father was alive. My sister died about 2 years and a half ago. She had the scarlet fever dreadful. She lay ill 7 weeks. We was both very fond of her, me and mother. I often wish she had been spared. I should not be alone in the world as I am now. We might have gone on together, but it is dreadful to be quite alone, and I often now think how well we could have done if she was alive. Mother has been dead just a year this month. She took cold at the washing, and it went to her chest. She was only bad a fortnight. She suffered a great pain, and, poor thing, she used to fret dreadful as she lay ill about me, for she knew she was going to leave me. She used to plan how I was to do when she was gone. She made me promise to try to get a place and keep from the streets if I could, for she seemed to dread them so much. When she was gone, I was left in the world without a friend. I am quite alone. I have no relation at all, not a soul belonging to me. For 3 months I went about looking for a place, as long as my money lasted, for mother told me to sell our furniture to keep me and get me clothes. I could have got a place, but nobody would have me without a character, and I knew nobody to give me one. I tried very hard to get one. Indeed I did, for I thought of all mother had said to me about going into the streets. At last, when my money was gone, I met a young woman in the street, and I asked her to tell me where I could get a lodging. She told me to come with her, as she would show me a respectable lodging-house for women and girls. I went, and I've been there ever since. The women in the house advised me to take to flower selling, as I could get nothing else to do. One of the young women took me to the market with her, and showed me how to bargain with a salesman for my flowers. At first, when I went out to sell, I felt so ashamed I could not ask anybody to buy of me, and many times went back at night with all my stock, without selling one bunch. The woman at the lodging-house is very good to me, and when I have a bad day she will let my lodging go until I can pay her. She always gives me my dinner, and a good dinner it is, of a Sunday, and she will often give me a breakfast when she knows I have no money to buy any. She is very kind, indeed, for she knows I am alone. I feel very thankful to her, I am sure, for all her goodness to me. During the summer months I take 1 shilling 6p per day, which is 6p profit, but I can only sell my flowers 5 days in the week. Mondays there is no flowers in the market, and of the 6p a day I pay 3p for lodging. I get a halfpenny worth of tea, a halfpenny worth of sugar, 1 pound of bread, 1.5p, butter, a halfpence. I never tastes meat on Sunday. And what shall I do in the winter? I don't know. In the cold weather last year, when I could get no flowers, I was forced to live on my clothes. I have none left now, but what I have on. What I shall do, I don't know. I can't bear to think of it.
The number of lads of a well-educated class who support themselves by street selling is not large. I speak of those whom I have classed as children under 15 years of age. If a boy run away, scared and terrified by the violence of a parent, or maddened by continuous and sometimes excessive severity, the parent often feels compunction, and I heard of persons being sent to every lodging-house in London and told to search every dry arch to bring back a runaway. On these occasions the street sellers willingly give their aid. I have even heard of women whose degradation was of the lowest, exerting themselves in the recovery of a runaway child, and that often unsolicited, and as often unrecompensed. The children who are truants through their own vicious or reckless propensities, or through the inducements of their seniors, become far more frequently thieves or lurkers, rather than street sellers. As to runaway girls of a well-educated class, and under 15, I heard of none who were street sellers. I now give instances of 2 runaway lads, who have been dishonest and honest. The one, when he told me his story, was a slim and rather tall young man of 23 or 24, with a look, speech, and air anything but vulgar. He was the son of a wealthy jeweller in a town in the west of England, and ran away from home with an adult member of his father's establishment, who first suggested such a course, taking with them money and valuables. They came to London, and the elder thief, retaining all the stolen property, at once abandoned the child, then only 10, and little and young-looking for his age. He fell into the hands of some members of the swell mob, and became extremely serviceable to them. He was dressed like a gentleman's son, and was innocent-looking and handsome. His appearance, when I saw him, showed that this must have been the case as regards his looks. He lived with some of the swell mob's men, then a more prosperous people than they are now, in a good house in Southwark Bridge Road. The women who resided with the mob's men were especially kind to him. He was well fed, well lodged, well clad, and petted in everything. He was called the Kid, a common slang term for a child, but he was the Kid. He went to work in Regent Street, or wherever there were most ladies, and his appearance disarmed suspicion. He was, moreover, highly successful in church and chapel practice. At length he became spotted. The police got to know him, and he was apprehended, tried and convicted. He was, however, he believed, through the interest of his friends, of whose inquiries concerning him he had heard, but of that I know nothing, sent to the philanthropic asylum, then in St. George's Road. Here he remained the usual time, then left the place well clothed, and with a sum of money, and endeavoured to obtain some permanent employment. In this endeavour he failed. Whether he exerted himself strenuously or not, I cannot say, but he told me that the very circumstance of his having been in the philanthropic was fatal to his success. His character and recommendations necessarily showed where he had come from, and the young man, as he then was, became a beggar. His chief practice was in screeving, or writing on the pavement. Perhaps some of you may remember having noticed a wretched-looking youth who hung over the words, "I am starving," chalked on the footway on the Surrey side of the Waterloo Bridge. He lay huddled in a heap, and appeared half dead with cold and want, his shirtless neck and shoulders being visible through the rents in his thin jean jacket. Shoe or stocking he did not wear. This was the rich jeweller's son.
Until he himself told me of it, and he seemed to do so with some sense of shame, I could not have believed that the well-spoken and well-looking youth before me was the piteous object I had observed by the bridge. What he is doing now, I am unable to state. Another boy, who thought he was not yet 15, though he looked older, gave me the following account, and this little fellow's statement I give somewhat fully, for I believe he is a type of the most numerous class of runaway urchins who ripen, so to speak, into costermongers, after helping that large body of street traders. He was short, but seemed strong, and his career, so far, is chiefly remarkable for his perseverance, exercised as much, perhaps, from insensibility as from any other quality. He was sufficiently stupid. If he had parents living, he said, he didn't know nothing about them. He had lived and slept with an old woman who said she was his grandmother, and he'd been told that she weren't no relation. He didn't trouble himself about it. She sold lucifer boxes or any trifle in the streets, and had an allowance of 2 shillings weekly, but from what quarter he did not know. About 4 years ago he was run over by a cab, and was carried to the workhouse or the hospital. He believed it was Clerkenwell workhouse, but he weren't sure. When he recovered and was discharged, he found the old woman was dead, and a neighbour went with him to the parish officers, by whom, as well as I could understand him, he was sent to the workhouse. After some inquiry, he was soon removed to Norwood. On my asking if he meant Norwood, he replied, "No, Norwood," and there he was with a number of other children, with a Mr. Horbin. He did not know how long he was there, and he didn't know as he had anything much to complain of. But he ran away. He ran away because he thought he would, and he believed he could get work at paper staining. He made his way to Smithfield, near where there was a great paper stainer's, but he could not get any work, and he was threatened to be sent back, as they knew from his dress that he had run away. He slept in Smithfield courts and alleys, fitting himself into any covered corner he could find. The poor women about were kind to him, and gave him pieces of bread. Some knew that he had run away from a workhouse, and was all the kinder. "The first browns as I ever earned," he said, "was from a drover. He was a-going into the country to meet some beasts, and had to carry some parcels for somebody down there. They wasn't heavy, but they was awkward to grip. His old woman looked out for a young cove to help her old man, and saw me first, so she calls me, and I gets the job. I give the greatest of satisfaction, and had 6pence give me. For Jim," the drover, "was well paid, as there was valuable parcels, and he said he had taken the greatest of care on 'em, and had engaged a poor lad to help him." On his return, the child slept in a bed, in a house near Gray's Inn's Lane. For the first time since he had run away, he believed, about a fortnight. He persevered in looking out for odd jobs, without ever stealing, though he met some boys who told him he was a fool not to prig. "I used to carry his tea from his old woman," he went on, "to an old cove as had a stunning pitch of fruit in the City Road. But my best friend was Stumpy. He had a beautiful crossing as a sweeper then, but he's dead now, and buried as well. I used to talk to him, and whistle. I can just whistle." Here he whistled loud and shrill, to convince me of his perfection in that street accomplishment. "And to dance him the double shuffle." He favoured me with a specimen of that dance. "And he said I interested him. Well, he meant he liked it, I suppose. When he went to rest himself, for he soon got tired, over his drop of beer to his grub, I had his crossing, and his broom, for nothing. One boy used to say to Stumpy, 'I'll give you 1 pence for your crossing while you're grubbing,' but I had it for nothing, and at all I earned, sometimes 1 pence, sometimes 2 pence, but only once 3.5 pence. I've been helping old Bill with his summer cabbages and flowers," cauliflowers, "and now he's on live heels. I can sing 'em out prime. But you heard me. I has me bit of grub with him, and a few browns, and old Bill and young Bill too says I shall have better to do, but I can't until peas. I sleeps in a loft with hampers, which is old Bill's, a stunning good bed I've cried for and helped other costers. Stumpy sent me to him. I think he'd been one himself, but I was always on the lookout. I'll go for some buns soon. I don't know what I shall do time to come, and never thinks of it. I could read middlin', and ken a little now, but I'm out of practice.